Hey everybody, welcome to the last video for the history section of the course. I have to say I just watched all the previous former recordings of myself and I don't think I have a future in television. So in this video we're going to go through No Child Left Behind, just hit the highlights because it's no longer the law, but it did have a big impact. We're going to talk about Race to the Top, which was Obama's big initiative. And then we're going to talk about the Every Student Succeeds Act, which was ESSA reauthorized yet again in the last year of Obama. Okay, so No Child Left Behind. You've got to go back to the 2000 election of Bush versus Gore. They both had primarily the same election platform. They both called for high stakes testing, increased charter schools, higher standards for teachers. So no matter whether Bush nor Gore would have won, we would have had No Child Left Behind. Okay, so you need to know it is not some Republican conspiracy to destroy public education, which some people believe. When it was passed through Congress, actually a larger proportion of Democrats voted for it than Republicans, and it was devised by a bipartisan commission. So know that, okay? And the goal of No Child Left Behind was truly noble. It was to try to close the achievement gaps between the underachieving and the rest of the nation, no matter what those underachieving students were. So it really did start with a good intention. It was, however, fatally flawed. Okay. It started with George Bush's proclamation that it was time to give up the, quote, soft bigotry of low expectations. He and many social scientists thought that one of the biggest causes of underachievement among poor and minority students was low expectations on behalf of the system. So, No Child Left Behind had four focuses or foci. The first and most famous is the accountability focus. It called for standardized testings twice prior to high school and once in high school, and that everyone in the state had to take the test. Each state was allowed to make up their own test, but they were held accountable to getting 100% of the students to proficiency by the school year 2012-13. Now remember, this was back in 2001 when it was passed. So they gave a whole generation of school kids time to get through the system before you hit the 100% mark. But that was the foundation of the accountability system. As the years progressed and it got closer and closer to the 2013 school year, more and more and more schools were failing. And that was due to something called adequate yearly progress, or AYP, you may have heard of. Basically, if a school was, let's say, at 50% proficient, and then 10 years later they needed to be at 100% proficient, they could increase by 5% every year. So there are all different ways to track that growth. But as you got closer and closer to 100% of students passing, more and more and more schools ended up below whatever growth line they projected and were deemed failing schools or in need of improvement. And they would suffer a variety of sanctions. Initially, they had to publish their test results for the public to review. If they failed AYP for 2 years, they had to offer schools of choice so that any student in that failing school could attend any other school, and the transportation costs had to be paid by the district. All the way up to, if you failed for 6 years consecutively, you could reconstitute the school, which means going in and firing everybody in the building, maybe hiring some of those people back, but basically reconstituting the school. Make it a whole new school with all new people with higher expectations. So that's the first focus, is accountability. And that applied officially only to Title I schools. And I believe I explained what Title I schools back when I first talked about the Elementary and Secondary Education Act under Johnson. Title I schools are schools with large numbers of poor children. In Boise, you need more than 50% of low-income students to qualify as a Title I school. In Idaho, we applied the accountability measures of No Child Left Behind to every single school in the state, regardless of their Title I status. So, accountability is the first focus. The second focus is teacher quality. In No Child Left Behind, they demanded that every student in the nation be taught by a, quote, highly qualified teacher, which meant that the teacher needed to be fully licensed and pass some type of assessment in the subject matter they are teaching. Because of that, you are all now going to be required to pass the praxis exams. Okay. The third focus was parental choice. That really was just a giant pile of money to go into charter schools. Okay. The fourth focus was flexibility, and honestly, I'm not going to go into that, and for good reason. My official policy analyst estimation was that was a bunch of crap. I can explain it further to you in class in person. But the flexibility portion of No Child Left Behind was just nonsense. So the four foci were accountability, teacher quality, parental choice, and flexibility. Okay? So that was the law of the land for quite a while. 8 years after it was passed, Obama was elected. Obama didn't do much with No Child Left Behind. In fact, he left it untouched for 7 of the 8 years he was president, saying it was bad but not offering an alternative. What he did do was Obama became president in 2008. Okay, remember what happened in 2008? The economy collapsed. That was the Great Recession. As part of his stimulus package, he passed something called Race to the Top. Now, Race to the Top was a completely unique educational policy. What he did was he set aside several $billions to go into public education, but he didn't just give it to the states, which every other president had done. What he did was that he forced the states to apply for the money. And their applications had to show that the states had done several different things. So this was actually a stroke of political genius. What he did was he said, yeah, I'll give you money if you measure up. So he used the promise of money to force policy changes throughout all 50 states. Idaho never qualified for any of the Race to the Top money. Some of the things they asked for was a sign-off by all prominent stakeholders in the state. In our state, that would mean the governor's office, the State Board of Education, the Department of Education, the Teachers Union, the Boise, Meridian, maybe Pocatello school districts. But they couldn't even get that. Other things that they gave you points for in your application was if a state adopted the Common Core curriculum, which was fairly new back then. If they took limits off of charter schools to try to get more charter schools, and if they adopted a performance-based teacher evaluation system. There's a bunch of other stuff, but those are the biggies, and that was Obama's big contribution to educational policy. Okay, now in his last year, in 2016, while the presidential election was going on, he and Congress finally addressed No Child Left Behind, which, remember, was the reauthorized version of the 1965 Elementary and Secondary Education Act. Okay? So in 2016, it was reauthorized again, and it was called the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. Okay? Now, ESSA has been universally praised over No Child Left Behind, which a lot of people saw as draconian. The ESSA Act is more flexible. It allows states to come up with their own goals and then hold them accountable to those goals, but the goals must include high school graduation rate. It also forces states to focus on the bottom 5% of their schools. It's kind of like a triage method. In No Child Left Behind, if any school failed in any way, they were all treated the same way. In ESSA, they're only looking at the bottom 5% so they can concentrate their resources where they're most needed. They also cap the students that are given special ed waivers from taking the tests to 1%. That then prohibits principals from using special ed waivers to basically hide the low achieving kids, which several people did across the nation. So that was a way to stop that. And it also killed the High Quality Teacher Act, which forced everyone to be certified in every single subject. Um, States are now incentivized to come up with new and innovative ways to qualify teachers to teach. So, in a nutshell, that's the educational history from 2000 to 2016. You had No Child Left Behind with its four foci and with AYP being a huge part of it. You had Race to the Top under Obama, which he leveraged the promise of money for policy changes. And then you have Every Student Succeeds Act, also under Obama at the end, uh, that kind of addressed some of the flaws of No Child Left Behind. The only thing that President Trump has done is in this area was appoint a very controversial Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, who has been a longtime critic of public education, and quite honestly, she hasn't done much as Secretary of Education. Her biggest achievement to date is addressing um, sexual assault or Title IX complaints by increasing the threshold of evidence that someone has to provide to actually accuse somebody and get them convicted of whatever the indiscretion happens to be. And that was in response to, I think it was the Yale lacrosse team. Maybe it was the Princeton lacrosse team. Anyway, some lacrosse team back east was accused of all kinds of indiscretions, and it ends up that the person accusing them was making it up. So that's pretty much the. I'll stop there.